Hey everybody, my name is Jay Martin. Thanks for watching. This is kind of a neat little game. This is a 3 versus 4 game. So on the team I played on, we had 3 players, and we're playing against 4 human players. On the right side, playing for me, all these guys are in Huntsman. This is Triphammer playing as GB right there. Let me scroll around to give you a good view of that. So Triphammer's on the right. I'm in the center also as GB, and then on the left is SK Marsh. And these guys are both really good players, and it's good to get a game with them. And this 3 versus 4, I'm sorry, it's raining, so it's hard to give you a good overhead shot. But you can see on the right side there's a Prussian, and then a French player, and then a GB player, and another GB player. So these 3v4 games are pretty challenging. Obviously, there's an extra opponent that you have to kill, and it requires a fair bit of patience and actually a lot of teamwork to get it done properly. And we're playing this game on Syrian Ridge, which I think a terrain map, it's probably easier to do this 3v4 game on a terrain map as opposed to like grassy flats, because there's some bottlenecks that you can exploit, and you really got to kind of use the terrain to your advantage. And there's a couple little tricks that I'm going to try to show you what we do. In this particular game, Triphammer here on the right side is moving up to engage with the Prussian player, and we got kind of a gift. The French player here hangs back, which is really nice because it made the game seem more like a 3v3 to start. And then over on the left, SK is playing as France, is going to get up and engage this GB player, and SK is going to take a lot of advantage of these bottlenecks to kind of slow him down. That really helps if you're on the undermanned team, because it kind of limits how many units can engage you at any given time, yada yada yada. Now, you can't really predict where the opponents are going to go or what they're going to do or anything. So, generally a good plan for this is kind of what you do normally. Is you want to kind of hold out in the center, and the idea if I could occupy these 2 players in the center, then maybe that'd be good, and that might be able to free Trip over here to take out this guy. Now Trip's doing a pretty smart thing. The big problem you face if you're on the undergun team is eventually you're going to run out of ammo. So what Trip's done is he's run his guys up to the base of the hill, and notice these lights are shooting, but they're shooting right into the ground. They're not hitting anybody. Trip has not taken a casualty right there. So one little trick you want to use if you're on the 3-person team is find little ways to get your opponent to run out of ammo and to conserve your ammo. I found myself in this game like turning fire at will off a lot and then turn it back on when I had a good shot. So if I had somebody just on the outer range of my targeting arc, I would turn fire at will off and wait till I had a better shot at them. If they're hiding in a forest, don't bother shooting at them, because forests are going to block a lot of your bullets. So you kind of got to manage. One of the little tricks to doing this well is you got to manage your ammunition pretty well. You can't just blast away like you wouldn't a 1v1. You got to be pretty calm about it. This is in the center, and this is me moving up to engage the sort of center left GB player who brought a bunch of rifles. And I'm going to try just to get this guy to waste his ammo. You can see I'm running into these 2 forests right here. I'm very, I'm okay to suck up the casualties if he's going to shoot at those forests. Another thing that we did, and you notice Trip over here, he didn't bring any cav at all. And I think I brought 2 units of cav, and I think SK maybe brought 2 as well. Cav is just not terribly good on this map in particular, but then the other thing is when you're playing on the undergun team, you really need to maximize the bullets and just number of men in your army, which kind of makes cav a bad deal. Trip is still getting on, letting this guy shoot into the dirt, and that's what goes on this part of the battle. If you look at the mini-map, you notice that SK over here is having an engagement on his side with his guy, and on my side, I'm just going to sit in the hill and try to get what I get is this unit of rifles. I run into range of this unit of rifles, and I get to see those rifles are just shooting in the ground right there. So that's something that I do early in the game. And we're willing to kind of chill in the forest right here and not fight this guy too much. That was a pretty good cav charge from this dude. He gets into those chasseurs that didn't have a lot of protection, SK is forced to countercharge that cav, which is something you don't want to do that often, but is certainly a necessary evil. And he's trying to goad this guy into advancing on top of the hill. One little trick that these guys used was kind of conceding what seems like a terrain advantage, like conceding the hill to their opponent to try to get them to run in and kind of overcommit. You really got to choose where and when you fight really carefully here. And so you want to use lots of little tricks. You got to play a much more patient game. You got to, advance, goad your opponent into coming back, and you really can't throw away a unit at all. Every unit counts when you're playing in this particular style of game. Let me zoom up to show you what's going on. Now the Prussian guy is doing something kind of smart. He's running some units around the far side of this big lake here, which is a pretty clever tactic. Pretty clever tactic there. And I'm not really sure to give you a comment on what army is best to bring in this scenario. Obviously, Trip Airman and I both preferred to bring GB. Just because their line is so good. I figure worst to worst, if I just get into a straight shootout, I'd rather have GB line with me than anything else, and it's affordable enough that you can bring more than you can with France. But SK is obviously pretty successful with France over in his flank. This guy cav charges into my lights, so I have to pull my lights back. I think I get away with that, yeah, with very few casualties. I don't rat his cav, but that's a good example of kind of getting your opponent to attack you and pulling back and taking advantage of everything. Now, the French player who was hanging back starts to advance here, and he moves these volts up into this area. These volts, and then there's two more here, pretty unprotected. I think here in a minute I'm going to start... Yeah, I see my cav unit that I'm moving up right here. I'm going to burn one of my two cav units trying to do some damage to these volts and maybe give the French guy a bloody nose and make him think twice about advancing. Is kind of what I want to do. Pretty boring over here. Trip Hammer is still just moving really cautiously with this guy, getting him to try to overcommit with those rifles and maybe with this cav again. Up on my end, again, I'm just chilling in the forest trying to get this guy to shoot at the ground, and that's actually kind of working. Because the French player is kind of conceding this flank right here, that lets me... it's going to let me play around with my lights. This guy does move pretty aggressively and catch my lights out of position there, so I have to pull them back and hopefully get these guys to shoot into the dirt a little bit more. And I think right there I turned fire at will off at that unit. I think I let that unit take one volley because I wasn't sure if they'd be able to hit or not. It turns out they weren't. So right there I kind of let that go. And then Marsh is doing the flank around the lake move. He's got an old guard there. That's a nice unit. And but again, the same thing. These guys, generally you don't want to bring rifles to any battle. Rifles kind of suck. But in this scenario, 4 versus 3, I might do that if I was them, because if they can just get some free casualty shots with those rifles, that might be a good idea. Like this, if you're on the team with 4 players, this might be a scenario where rifles are actually called for. You can't go wrong. I mean, light infantry is good too, but this might be a scenario where rifles are a good idea. I don't know. This is my cav charge. I already went through the first unit of volts and did about 20 casualties to them. I got through the second unit of volts and do another, 15 to them. I couldn't really hang around in melee with these guys because he had line coming. In hindsight, this might have been not the best use of my cav unit there. It winds up getting countercharged by these lancers here, and I kind of wanted to go after his general right there, but I wind up, see, I'm kind of indecisive with this cav. So this is pretty poor cav use for me. I don't get a ton of value out of it. It probably would have been best to save it for the end game. Live and learn. I think that if that cav charge would have been more successful, that I would have been happier with it, but I didn't actually route any of these volts. However, Trip does use the occasion of the disorder in his line to... or in the French player's line to move his line up and get on these volts with his foot units. And this is me right here. I'm trying to follow him up and take this position. I was a little bit late on that. I don't know. When you're playing the center position, it's really easy to get distracted and look at, manage, because you got to manage 2 flanks, and that kind of happened to me right there. Again, I'm going to try to get these rifles shooting at my lights right here. And this light pretty much just serves as a meat shield. These 3 units of rifles are just going to shoot at this guy with the fire at will turned off. That's actually okay. If you're sitting in a forest, they're going to be fairly inaccurate. So if you can sit in a forest, that's a pretty substantial advantage. The interesting part of the game is going on right here. Trip is advancing pretty strong. It's the Prussian guy, and Trip's not slowing down. He actually advances hard to start engaging the French player, and arguably a little too aggressive, I think. Right about now, I think the Prussian player drops or like quits, which I don't really understand, and they of course go, all these units go ape shit and wind up on Trip Hammer's flank, so we wind up having to pull back right there. Let me zoom back over. SK's got more full-on engagement. He's run up to the base of the hill and is trying to take this guy out. Another GB Cav unit has come in onto his flank right there. So SK's got a pretty good shootout going on right here. And he's doing pretty well because all these units are going to be shooting in the back of the other units. If you're going to win this 3v4 game, you kind of need your opponents to make a handful of mistakes for you. And that's a good example of the mistakes that can be made. Back over here, we get caught a little bit. This is Trip Hammer having to pull back because the Prussian units freak out, start getting on his flank. We do have a pretty good position, though, because I'm able to cover Trip Hammer's retreat, and I'm going to get some pretty quality shots at the Prussian player while I'm sitting inside the forest. And then we wind up kind of trading roles because all this Prussian Cav, like a couple more Prussian Cav units are going to come in, and they actually catch me. You know, when like one single horse gets into your unit so you can't square anymore. They're going to catch me. I squared a little bit too late. But we have pretty good teamwork right here. And what's going to happen is, see that Cav unit catches me so I can't square. But what I'm able to do is Trip Hammer is able to square right behind me. And so I just run my foot unit through Trip Hammer's square. And so Trip Hammer square winds up catching all of the Cav, which wound up being pretty good teamwork. And again, we were having to be really, really careful because we had a bunch of units that get bunched up right here. So this is a good example of us having to manage turning fire at will on and off so that we're not shooting each other in the back. And you can see all this Prussian Cav. What is that? It's going to be about 4 Prussian Cav and a line unit that comes in from melee is all going to get stuck on Trip Hammer square. I'm going to be able to pull in behind him, turn fire at will back on, and then we're going to chew through about 5 or 6 Prussian units really, really quick right there, which turned out pretty good. You kind of need to get good wholesale slaughter of some opponent units to really make that work. Over here, Trip Hammer is able to be a bit more aggressive because the Prussian has shifted his axis of attack this direction, and that coupled with the relative passivity of the French player buys us all the time that we need to get good advantage on that. In the center, this player right here is engaging with all of his rifles, and again, this is a situation where I'm very willing just to sit in the forest and let him shoot at me. My units are not shooting back, and you can see how effective that is. Oh, I guess I do shoot back right there. Oh, that's right, because this unit is at an angle right here, so I'm able to get good shots on the flank of that unit, which seemed like an opportunity worth turning fire at will back on. And then a firefight does occur here in the middle between the French player and us, and this requires a fair bit of cat and mouse. I think the GB player is going to shift units there. It requires us to pull back and everything, but what we're trying to do right now is we're going to wrap up this Prussian player. If you look at the mini-map, you can see that Trip Hammer is coming around this direction, and we're going to be able to get pretty good fire on these French units and defeat them wholesale is what we're going to be able to do. Okay, where are we? SK is still having this fight for the hill, and he's doing quite well, actually. And SK gets a whole bunch of kills right when he needed it. A good move for him is, remember those 2 units that he wrapped around the lake. What he winds up being able to do with those units is distract a bunch of units away from this area of the map, and so he's able to get firepower preponderance here and then push his unit back, or his opponent back off that hill. SK does have a problem, though, in that a lot of the second GB player is going to be shifting resources this direction. And eventually SK is just going to kind of run out of ammo and have some problems. But he certainly does his job at this part in the game, which is, he takes his opponent out of this section of the map and buys us a ton of time to work on the other flank, and buys us a ton of advantage, and not only pins down a whole bunch of the enemy here. Like this Volt unit that SK put here just was incredibly good bait for. There's about 7 units there shooting at our 2 units of lights here, which again is sort of virtual firepower advantage, because if we can pin down all of these units here just with this bait, then that's going to buy SK the time to get advantage in the flank where he's strong. And yeah, I got to think that if I was these players, you can't let that happen. You have to recognize when a lot of your units are getting pinned down by very few, and you can't let that happen. So if you're ever playing a game and you're like, wow, I got 6 units facing off against 2, then you either need to be really aggressive to wrap up that section of the map, or you got to shift your resources where they're needed. Is what you want to do. Now, back over here, so we're finishing off the Prussian player, and what that's going to let us do is we're pushing down the hill towards the French player, and then Triphammer's going to have a ton of units left over that he's going to be able to push to the remnants of the French guy that are still sitting back there. This is another good example of what you can't do. You can't keep your army separate like this. Strength in numbers, you can't get split up like that. If you get split up like that, then we're going to, again, get more units on the relevant part of the field. Can't do that. And so what you're going to watch here is the slow but inevitable grind as Triphammer kind of walks across his side of the map and takes that person out. And again, I'm kind of doing my thing in the center, which is just pin down as many of these people as possible. This is where it starts to look bad for SK, because you can see there's 3 more line units coming his direction, and his army has taken a brunt of the firepower from the first GB player, and he's both running out of bodies and he's running out of ammo about this point. But what we do have going for me is, because I haven't really been challenged in the center that much, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got like 6 line units that really haven't been engaged, and that really I don't need to hold any part of the line. So what that's going to let us do, and I have a cav unit that I haven't used yet. So what that's going to let us do is it's going to let me shift a whole bunch of my army over to help out SK. 2 things here. That's an advantage of playing on a terrain map with bottlenecks. If you bring a lot of line infantry, that's going to allow you to have a large infantry reserve, and so I'm going to be able to put that infantry reserve into action. And the second thing is that you notice, even if you count 1, 2 line, and then these 3 lights here that I'm using to pin down this section of the map, because I can pin down this bottleneck with relatively few units, you can see that I'm starting to shift resources over to SK's flank. That really buys you a lot of time and lets you fight battles where you want to fight it. And if you're able to dictate the pace of the game and also the geography of the game, you're going to have a huge advantage. So anytime that your opponent is dictating where the fights occur, when the fights occur, and who the fights occur with, you're going to have a problem. And the ability to win when you're outnumbered like this, you're really going to rely on using those kind of factors to your advantage, and that's exactly what we were able to do in this particular scenario. I think at this point, or pretty soon here, SK is going to make one last feint towards that hill, and then we're going to call no joy and ask SK to pull back to a line like that. Yep, there he goes, because you can see the GB player is moving a bunch of his resources down this axis right here. When that happens, and so, in other words, our opponents are starting to take some initiative. When that happens, you have 2 options. You can either sit there passively and let them put that initiative to work, but what we do instead is you're going to notice that while they move on this axis here, I'm going to move a lot of my resources back on an axis right there to get on their flank. So even though our opponents are taking the initiative, the way that we get that initiative back is when they move, they open up some holes in a flank, and so we move units to threaten that flank is kind of what you have to be doing. And that's, I mean, basic, tactics there, but a thing that a lot of Napoleon players don't get, I think, a lot of the time, and that's a function of using the terrain and then picking fights that are good for you. Now, over on this flank, what is going on is what we're still doing is a lot of these units don't have ammo anymore, and I see a lot of times when players, their units run out of ammo, they just send them on a reckless melee charge. You don't want to do that because your opponent doesn't know that you're out of ammo, so they just might sit there and shoot at you. And you can either use them as a meat shield, or if they don't shoot at you, you can at least threaten them, and that'll really retard their movement. They'll, wait. They'll still respect that line unit that doesn't have ammunition as if it did. So don't waste your units that run out of ammo. You can still use those units productively, either as a bluff or as a meat shield, and then later in the game when you really need it, you can run them in for melee when they're going to do some good work. Now, right about here, you can see these two units were moving up to occupy this position here, which will let us flank these units that are left over from this player. I think down here, this is Trip Hammer coming up on his side, and so we're going to be able to surround and destroy these 5 units here. And you can also see that in this section of the map, we're obviously moving units up to engage the flank here. The push that the GB player made through this little bottleneck didn't go terribly well for him. We were able to rout the 2 of the 3 units they were making that maneuver with, and so what they have left is to make this push down on the far left. And SK's got ammo left, and because this guy just kind of sends a couple of reckless melee charge, well, that's a cold stream, so that might be a calculated melee charge, but it certainly lets us get the first shot against them. And I think that we're going to do some clever things and to get more resources on this section of the field is what we're doing. So at this point, things are going pretty well for us. We obviously have taken out the majority of these 2 players. Trip Hammer is sending to clean up the handful of units that are still left in this area of the field. Right about this point, I'm able to get on the flank and destroy the rest of this leftmost GB player. And although things are looking kind of bad for us, SK is kind of running out of men and ammo because of all of those reserve line units. I'm able to push, and it looks like I'm pushing another 3 units over there right now, and my cav is about to get into work. That this game is looking really, really good for us right now, and just kind of by being patient and maximizing the value that we could get for our units all across the board, maximizing terrain advantage, and some good teamwork, we were able to put a pretty good game together, and being real careful with who our units were shooting at and when we had fire at will turned on and off, yada yada. We were able to get some pretty good value for our units. I do think that if you're playing this 3v4 game against a well-coordinated team, you would have pretty much an impossible task. I'm not really sure how you do it against a team that was super well coordinated or that could maneuver well. I think you'd also have a lot of problems with it on grassy flats, so that might be a pretty good challenge, is to try this against a coordinated team on grassy. These players were all rated 4 or 5 stars, all of them, so they weren't noobs by any stretch of the imagination, but obviously they weren't coordinated. They couldn't talk to each other, so that was another advantage that we did have going for us right there. Power of teamwork really pays off. This is on the left side. SK is kind of getting bum rushed and running out of men. I'm able to help him out a little bit right there. Help him out just a little bit. I think that's my last cav unit that I send in, that I'm able to route a couple of these people. When that cav unit went in, the 4 units that it charged were all below the number that you need to form square. They're all like in the 40s. So I was able to plow through 3 or 4 infantry units with that cav unit. That cav unit does pretty much die in the process, but I think we got pretty good value out of that unit right there. And we were really able to blunt the attack that came down that direction. Oops, bad zoom right there. This is Trip Hammer. He's finishing up killing all the units on this side, so we've cleared that side of the field. And we have pretty much cleared. This dude only has like these 5 or 6 units left, so we're able to run up. And this is, I mean, the game is won at this point, so we're able to get up there and finish them off. Finish them off pretty good. And yeah, and so it's just a matter of reforming line to get good fire on these people. SK's, man, that unit right there, that Polish unit got up to 2 chevrons. That unit did some really good work for SK. He got really good value out of that unit. And here is kind of me finishing up the remaining GB line units. And we're able to put this together. This game is really long, by the way. If you look at the clock, we've already played like 45, 50 minutes. I imagine the timer was sent to either 40 minutes or an hour. I'm not really sure, but that's the end. You know, we just route everybody right there, and we think the game's won, and then we're like, what the fuck? And then this fucking guy's got his general back there, and then this guy starts talking about, oh, I can just run around and get a draw. I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I mean, the computer might tell you that you have a draw, but we have obviously killed all of you. And so we start chasing this guy, and he's going to make my video last about 2 minutes longer than it should, because you can see I'm going to have to run all the way over to kill this fucker. Pretty unsportsmanlike, if you ask me, because this person is wasting... There's 6 other players in this game that this guy is wasting all of their time, and the end really isn't in doubt, and we all would really like to get a clear finish so we can look at the results and the kill totals and everything. So I think this is kind of a dick move. If you lost the game, you lost the game. Just run your general in there and, you know, just get it over with. It's not very polite to do this, and pretty soon, I think, yeah, see, this guy actually starts running. Like he's going to run it to the other side of the map over there. Like, come on, give me a fucking break. Not very cool. Eventually, I think he stops. SK catches him, actually, is what I think happens. Yeah, okay, so he decides to actually charge SK's general, which is 5 people left in it, which, whatever you want to do, dude. Would have been nice if I had a cav unit left here, but that's my general coming in to finish him off. I think I'm going to get this guy pretty soon. Anyway, this was really fun. This is the first undermanned game that I'd played. It was a lot different. It was an interesting experience. Recommend you give it a try. It's kind of an interesting challenge. And I want to say a great game to my buds and huntsmen who played with me, Triphammer and SK Marsh. SK really doesn't like Shogun. So anyway, Triphammer, the big kill winner. SK did all kinds of work on his side. I didn't do much work. I just kind of held the center, and I didn't kill many people. I should work on that. But anyway, GG, thanks for watching. Bye.